What secret are you taking to your grave? My parents took me to get my hearing checked when I was 12 because I wasn't responding when they called my name. I pretended not to hear some of the beeps in the hearing aid test room. I wore a hearing aid for 2 years as a result. I don't know why I did that. I once took a week-long trip to London. My mother asked me to get her a small rock from there because neither of us have ever been out of the country. So, I spend the whole trip looking for this rock and finally find the perfect one. Fantastic. So I get home, I'm taking inventory of all of my souvenirs, and the rock is gone. I immediately think back to where I last saw it. It was on the bedside table in the hotel. I quickly run outside and find a decent rock and I clean it off. I eventually gave it to her with the story that I got it from a castle. It'd break her heart to know that I got it from our backyard. In my first year of college, I was really hungover one morning and was staying at my parents' house for the weekend. I was wearing loose-fitting athletic shorts with no underwear, and when I went to fart, a stream of diarrhea squirted out and got all over the carpet. I went to grab some paper towels, but by the time I got back to the living room, my dad was on his hands and knees cleaning it up and yelling at my dog. I've never had the heart to tell him it was my accident. What was your most horrific game of truth or dare? I got dared to answer the door and pay for the pizza we ordered completely naked. The doorbell rings, I strip down quickly, and I grab the cash to pay for the pizza. The pizza guy was not waiting at the door. It was the mom of one of the girls at the party. She had come to pick her up early, only to find me at the door naked. Her husband was a church minister. The party ended pretty quickly when she called all the other parents were called to pick up their kids. Good times. When I was in 6th grade, I was dared to let these 3 girls tie me to the bed, in my clothes, and do anything they wanted for 10 minutes. I thought they would do something sexy. Instead, they spent the whole time dropping different objects onto my nuts, from varying heights. One girl dropped a heavy tape dispenser on me, which made me cry. What is it like to have children you don't want? I was conceived to replace a baby boy that died. My mom was so disappointed I was a girl, she forgot my name for a while, and now I have 2 middle names. I had a brother growing up who was favored by both my parents, but he really was amazing. He died 5 years ago in a motorcycle wreck. I don't care that my parents are disappointed that I was the one that survived. I've made myself who I want to be. I only talk to my dad occasionally, and my mom became an alcoholic. I don't talk to her. My life is separated from theirs, and I encourage other people to cut off the toxic people, even if it's your parents. It's liberating. I knew a woman who had a kid she didn't want. She talked about how she felt so guilty for not loving him that she worked extra hard to give him a good life. All her money went toward his education and things he wanted. The part one can't forget is that she set an alarm on her phone to go off every day to remind her to tell him that she loved him, because it didn't come naturally to tell him that, and she was afraid of him not feeling loved. What incident at your job caused a mass firing or quitting? I used to work at a pickle factory. When the new owners took over, they insisted on changing the recipe that had been the same for over 50 years without consulting the workers. Some of the employees' family had worked there. They apparently felt so strongly about the recipe that 13 people quit, and most of the others were outside with protest signs the next day, until eventually they switched it mostly back to the way it was. None of those who quit came back. I worked for a large construction company in Florida. I was on the road crew. We had a big machine to mix up the dirt before paving. It has giant teeth that spin super fast. Someone set the blades too low and ripped an international fiber optic cable out of the ground. A clean cut would have been bad, but this cable was shredded beyond belief. It cost $100,000 per hour that this cable was down. Luckily, I wasn't at work that day. When I came in the next day, anyone who was even near the incident got fired. To put it into perspective, the cable was thicker than your upper leg and composed of thousands of glass strands. Every strand had to be fused back together. It cost the company millions. About 40 people were fired, and I was put on another crew. Teachers, any funny moments between students that have a crush on someone? Former 6th grade teacher here. I was there to see one of my kids take his first big leap. At lunch, he asked the girl he had a crush on to go on a date. She smiled and said yes. Immediately, the boy on the other side of her said, "Don't go out with that guy, go out with me." She smiled and said, "Okay." That hurts. Middle school is tough, man. I'm a high school teacher. Depending on the kid, they either get louder or quieter when their crushes are present. The loud ones are annoying. The quiet ones are the ones I would purposefully sit next to their crushes. I have this one teacher that will just say anything that's on her mind. One time she just flat out said, "Do you guys like each other or what?" to these two kids in my class. Within 3 days, they were dating and still are. People who left their family and never came back. Why? Where did you go? My cousin was dating this woman who was just an awful human being. She got pregnant, swore it was his, and once the kid was born, the state went after him for child support. The paternity test came back showing it wasn't his, and she went crazy. He asked her to calm down and said he wanted to take a walk to cool off. He left everything he owned, minus the clothes on his back and his wallet, and went for a walk that he never came back from. A few years ago, the kid found him, as he was now 17, and went on some giant rant about him being a bum and whatever other nonsense. My cousin told him he wasn't his dad. The paternity test showed that, and he had no idea why she told him he was the father and abandoned them. I think the kid left a whole lot more confused than when he showed up. Doctors, what is the most obvious case of a patient faking you've ever seen? My husband is a firefighter, and he told me about a time where they were called for a man seizing. When they got there, a guy was lying face up on the floor not moving and then started faking a seizure. They stood there saying things like, "Oh wow, this is a bad one. If they start doing this, then we should really be worried." And the patient would suddenly start doing that. Apparently this went on for a while until he miraculously woke up in the ambulance asking for opiates. I'm an audiologist, and it's fairly common to have people fake a hearing loss. With adults, it's commonly for workers' compensation and benefits. Children do it for attention or to get out of school for a day. They are fairly easy to spot. Patients will come in, talking with me normally, but the test will show a profound hearing loss. We all have our tricks to get them to slip. I like to lower my mic volume and mention that they dropped something when they're in the booth. They instinctively reach for it, forgetting that they shouldn't have heard it. My favorite is when testing kids that are faking. Part of the test requires me to have them repeat words. I just slip in funny words like butt crack and watch to see them smile because they clearly heard it. People who grew up rich, what did you think was normal until you learned otherwise? All the little things. I knew we had nicer cars than average, a bigger house, went on more trips, and all that. But I thought everyone's refrigerators had wood-paneled cabinet doors, for example. The first time I saw a metal fridge, I thought it was weird, and I thought it was even weirder that the fridge and freezer were combined. But then I got really jealous because you could put magnets on it. I also thought everyone had a central vacuum system where you can sweep dirt into a little hole under the cabinets by the floor and it sucks it up. We had these little holes all over, in every room. Stuff like that. Probably a weird example, all of our dishes were very fancy. One time I went to a friend's house for dinner and we ate on colored plastic plates and non-matching plastic cups. I thought that was the weirdest thing ever and asked why we were eating with camping dishes. What industry isn't horrible for a change? Perhaps a well-managed restaurant or food truck can fall into this category. Lots of restaurants are wasteful, produce lots of garbage, abuse staff, or take a lot of fish out of the ocean or whatever. Some are better though, and have reasonable environmental impact and aren't really ruining the world in any way. At least that's my perception after working in them for many years. Waste management. Workers are compensated fairly, and there's been a steady shift towards environmentally conscious disposal. Don't really hear much in the way of scandals, just people doing their job as well as possible. Trick question. They're all horrible to some extent. Even supposedly benevolent charities and companies that claim to be all things positive have a little bit of evil or sketchiness to them. It's just about how much. Are we talking not paying taxes or destroying entire countries' landscapes? What's a sign of intelligence? The ability to express a complicated idea simply. The capacity to see something from multiple vantage points and explain opposing views. The ability to recognize when you're wrong, apologize and learn from it. Humor. Not engaging in pointless arguments. An intelligent person is constantly and infinitely aware of how little they truly know. A stupid person is constantly and infinitely aware that they know everything. Adaptability, the ability to recognize when you need help with something you're not familiar with or have never learned before, an eagerness to learn new things, and self-aware enough to know that other people are smarter than you in different things. Also, not turn intelligence into a competition. One person could be an expert data scientist, while another person could be an expert on Renaissance period art and literature, or an expert mechanic who can repair almost any engine.